Hi, I'm going to read a vignette called A Method to Resolve It from a longer piece that I've written called I Hate Myself and Want to Live. There is a junction between my views on love, spirituality, and art making that has led me to believe they are all similar activities. Each is a practice to be returned to as frequently as possible, ideally each day, and each contains a clue to life's purpose, or short of that, a technique for meaning making. In his 1956 book, The Art of Loving, psychologist, sociologist, and democratic socialist Erich Fromm suggested that love is an art that must be learned, saying, gendered language his, "Our whole culture is based on the appetite for buying, on the idea of a mutually favorable exchange. Modern man's happiness consists in the thrill of looking in shop windows, and in buying all that he can afford to buy, either for cash or on installments. He or she looks at people in a similar way. Two persons thus fall in love when they feel they have found the best object on the market, considering the limitations of their own exchange values. This attitude, that nothing is easier than to love, has continued to be the prevalent idea about love in spite of the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. There is hardly any activity, any enterprise which has started with such tremendous hopes and expectations and yet which fails so regularly as love. Could it be that only those things are considered worthy of being learned, with which one can earn money or prestige, and that love, which only profits the soul, but is profitless in the modern sense, is a luxury we have no right to spend much energy on?" Though the book has a few dated qualities, the overarching assertion that love is a state many of us mistakenly believe we must fall into, rather than a practice to continuously revisit, still feels completely contemporary. Meanwhile, a studio habit, whatever the studio may look like today to any given individual, is understood as a type of labor, at least by its practitioner. But in the 21st century, art making now copes with similar challenges around value as love does. Skill means something different in the postmodern age. Art's meaning, like love, is personal and intangible. And perhaps as a result, one must fall into artistic legitimacy by luck and by circumstance. Art is something that can be made by anyone, but financial reward requires some form of institutional or social approval. Most makers I know have at some point lost a gig to a potential client's creative niece or nephew. Artist Grayson Perry, in his book, Playing to the Gallery, says, "The web does have the alarming potential to realize Joseph Boy's prophecy that everyone is an artist. This could spell the end of art as we know it, when everyone becomes a producer and we all drown in a sea of mediocrity, made up of billions of minutely niched microchannels. The arbiters of taste melt away." The simultaneous yearnings to have art and art making accessible and to keep it safely cordoned off may actually be a friction between art's highest purpose as a therapeutic, empathic, regenerative exercise and the monetary worth of its creations. Adequate funding for the arts is a missing necessity, but even if other needs were properly paid for through governments like healthcare in the States, for instance, or a broader substantive commitment to keep everyone clothed, housed, educated, and fed, then art making could likewise become healthily all-inclusive. As it stands, there is either working despite the system or for it. But if COVID or climate catastrophe indicates anything, it is that nature will not wait for the power brokers to figure things out. The old ways won't hold, and inaction or working within the existing structures is not sustainable. Art making is a natural compulsion. The incentive of profit can engender stunning works of genius to be enjoyed by the many, but it can also lay waste to the spirit of would-be masters, who must navigate an art market reigned over by mega dealers and the sometimes shady money that flows through them. What does a natural art practice look like? Anti-materialism can be a feature of religion, though of course there are countless exceptions. Most of us seem to find a lot of wiggle room between our principles and our practices. My personal spiritual belief is that it is impossible for us to know whether or not there is a higher power. I have found solace in Zazen, the meditation practice of Zen Buddhism, because it does not challenge my agnosticism. On the contrary, it has allowed me to view my unknowing as a form of connection to the universe. Shunryu Suzuki, in his book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, said, "We do not even know what we're doing when we just practice with pure mind." So we cannot compare our way to some other religion. Some people say that Zen Buddhism is not religion. Maybe that is so. Or maybe Zen Buddhism is religion before religion. So it might not be religion in the usual sense, but it is wonderful. And even though we do not study what it is intellectually, even though we do not have any cathedral or fancy ornaments, it is possible to appreciate our original nature. It is the ritual, which I admittedly struggle to keep consistent, which I find curiously similar to painting and drawing. There's no more satisfying or mysterious feeling than the separation of my intellect and physical self that occurs while deep in the process of creating art. It feels as though someone else is doing the work. I've also experienced this while making music, when a melody comes from nowhere, and while exercising, when my body goes into autopilot, and now during meditation, when my awareness becomes acute. This is referred to colloquially as being in the zone, or as a flow state. There are those who seem to want to turn a studio practice into a place for logic, and others who insist it is only a realm for play. Others still see art as an open question, its greatest strength being that the possibilities are endless. For me, it is this zone, what is perhaps a break from intellect, that I find most fulfilling. It is a state I consider natural and unencumbered by incentive. For this reason, I don't always understand those who would pull their practices away from toil, particularly in service of a cheap joke or an attempt to seem clever. But monetizing that labor is rife with complexity. Is it more important to sell the finished result or to sell the method of the practice through teaching? I want a bigger house and a better future for my children, and I want to return to my practice day in and day out. But if I'm not selling decorations, and I'm not selling entertainment, and I'm not even selling poignancy, then what should I sell? Perhaps I shouldn't. Maybe art is not merchandise at all. Patreon accounts have become a way to support makers at the same time that GoFundMe accounts are being used to pay medical bills that should be covered by public dollars. Art is not a necessity in the way that health is, but art is intrinsic to civility and humanity. It should not be viewed as a luxury to make, own, or view. The painter Catherine Bernhardt said, "I think the best painters don't intellectualize their own art. They just make stuff. It's more about color choices and color combinations." And I think that's right, though my own mind won't rest when I'm not painting or meditating. Love's work can also seem tedious and requires a commitment of returning. A romantic partnership's best moments are those of deep understanding and connection that cannot be achieved without hours of prior experience. But I cannot hawk its triumphs. If art can be engaged in by anyone, perhaps it is perverse on some level to pass judgment on anyone's engagement with it. Or at least to the same degree that one understands it's inappropriate to have opinions about other people's choice of partner, or partners, or religious beliefs. What is success without money? What is artistic fulfillment without flattery?
Well,
Donate to find out. And the piece ends with a quote from Saul LeWitt that is from a letter he wrote to Eva Hesse, and then a poem by me. So Saul LeWitt: "You must practice being stupid, dumb, unthinking, empty. Then you will be able to do." And a poem: "I put a buttercup under your chin. When it turned yellow, you said you preferred margarine."